Are you curious if you have infertility? Maybe you are planning to start soon and you just kind of want to make sure everything's okay, or you've been trying for a couple of cycles and it's just not happening as easily as you thought it would. Well, today we're going to go over 5 signs of infertility in women. I'm Dr. Lora Shahine. I'm a double board certified OBGYN and reproductive endocrinologist, helping people build families for over 20 years, and I love educating. I'm so glad you found this channel. If you're new, be sure and subscribe so you get my weekly videos all about reproductive health. There's 2 other ways to stay in touch. Number 1, there's a link in the description to my newsletter. Each week you get educational content and recommendations. Another way to stay informed and stay in touch is to listen to my weekly podcast. There's a playlist here on YouTube. You can listen to the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's weekly interviews with fertility experts and fertility warriors, or sometimes I do a solo episode with a deep dive into a topic that's really important. But you can find my podcast and sign up for my newsletter in the description below. Now, today we're going to talk about infertility, which is so common and so frustrating. And I want you to know about 5 warning signs of infertility in women. We're going to go over each one at a time. One sign of infertility in women is absent or irregular menstrual cycles. Now, a menstrual cycle is typically about once a month. There can be some variation, 28 days, 26 days. But if you're having a pretty predictable, regular monthly cycle, that's an excellent sign that you are ovulating. You need to release an egg in the middle of the cycle that will signal a period about 2 weeks later if you're not pregnant. So irregular, unpredictable menstrual cycles, skipping cycles, going 2-3 months without a cycle, or completely absent menstrual cycles, that is a sign of irregular ovulation. And it's important to figure out why and get information, get some testing, get some information, try to help make those cycles regular so you have a much higher chance of getting pregnant sooner. The second warning sign of infertility in women is painful and heavy menstrual cycles. So it's typical to have a little bit of cramping, the first day or 2 of bleeding. Most people have bleeding anywhere from 2 to 5 days. But if you are having significant pain, it is limiting your ability to go to work, your ability to go to school, you're popping, ibuprofen more than the recommended list on the bottle, just to function throughout the day. If you're having, really strong back pains, if pain is associated with bowel changes, bladder changes, or really, really heavy bleeding for more than 7 days, large clots larger than a quarter, heavy and painful menstrual cycles can be a sign that something is going on, and it could be associated with infertility. We sometimes think about painful periods or pain with intercourse associated with endometriosis. Endometriosis is a chronic inflammatory condition impacting about 1 in 10 women that can be associated, although not always, with infertility. I've got some educational videos here all about endometriosis to teach you more. Heavy bleeding, painful periods can also be associated with some anatomical changes, things like fibroids, polyps. So getting an evaluation, talking to your doctor about your symptoms, understanding that painful and really heavy periods are not something that you should expect and really investigate can be helpful and make sure that you're not missing infertility. A third sign of infertility could be no signs of ovulation. So we already talked about having regular, predictable menstrual cycles as a sign of ovulation. Sometimes people can have a bleed and it really isn't because they ovulated recently. So you want to track your cycles and look for signs of ovulation. Ovulation, sometimes people get a little cramp on one side of their pelvis or the other right in the middle of their cycle. It's a pain with ovulation called Mittelschmerz. It's the name. It's like middle pain. It's a German word. Sometimes people will have an increase in production, a change in consistency of their cervical mucus as estrogen levels increase because the egg in the ovary is increasing and maturing and getting ready to ovulate. Estrogen levels from the ovary are increasing. That can increase the production and change the consistency of cervical mucus. So in the middle of your cycle, right around the time of ovulation, you'll get cervical mucus that looks like egg white. So it's kind of thin, clear, and kind of stretchy, and might be an increase in the amount of the production of cervical mucus that you kind of see when you're going to the bathroom. That can be a sign of ovulation. Other ways you can pick up on ovulation could be basal body temperature taking, could be taking ovulation predictor kits. A lot of this looking for signs of infertility is learning about your own cycle. So tracking it, looking for signs of ovulation. There are apps that you can use. There are books that can be helpful with this. I've got a lot of videos here on YouTube trying to help you understand if you're ovulating or not, or how to use ovulation predictor kits. So looking for signs and testing for ovulation is important. And if you are not getting these signs and the tests aren't working for you, it's time to talk to a doctor because I want to make sure that you're ovulating. A fourth sign of infertility can be miscarriages. So this is a common misconception. People often say, oh, well, I'm getting pregnant. I'm just not keeping the baby. So I'm not infertile. I'm getting pregnant. And having miscarriages can be a different type of infertility. Infertility can mean not having a baby, not having a live birth after you've been trying for over a year, or sometimes 6 months. I want you to get an evaluation as soon as possible, but I'm kind of talking about the textbook definitions. But I want you to understand recurrent miscarriage, multiple miscarriages, that can be a type of infertility or a warning sign that it's good idea to get an evaluation and get testing to make sure that you're not missing something. Sometimes anatomical issues cause miscarriages, like fibroids in the uterine cavity or large fibroids. So miscarriages are common. It happens in 1 in 4 clinically recognized pregnancies. The most common cause of miscarriage is a chromosome issue within the embryo. So it has nothing to do with the person that's getting pregnant. It's just not the right embryo. And your body is actually figuring that out. But if you're having more than one miscarriage, it can be a different type of infertility. And I would encourage you to talk to your doctor, think about getting some testing. And finally, the fifth sign of infertility can be some signs of hormonal changes. I'm specifically thinking about acne, changes in hair growth, and weight changes. So when I'm talking about these things, these are signs of something called PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. This metabolic disorder is associated with insulin resistance. It's associated with different hormonal communications and often elevated androgens, or high levels of male hormones. We all have female hormones, we all have male hormones, but in PCOS, there can be a little bit of an imbalance. And these high androgens, or high male hormones, can show up in different ways in our body. It can show up as acne. It can show up as extra hair growth, typically in the center part of your body, like mustache, chin, kind of thicker hairs in between the breast and the thighs. And it can also show up as male pattern hair thinning. So kind of like receding hairline or a balding spot right here, if you're feeling your hair is falling out, specifically in these areas, you can think about hormonal changes that could be causing infertility. The weight changes with PCOS, everyone's different. I think of PCOS as a spectrum, and not everybody will have all these different signs and symptoms. But oftentimes people that are really having difficulty losing weight, despite measures that they're taking, especially if it's associated with these other metabolic conditions, that can be a sign of PCOS. Not everyone with PCOS will have infertility, but it's can be associated. And so if you're having these hormonal changes, it could be a sign of infertility. Now let's recap. We talked about 5 symptoms of infertility in women: irregular or absent menstrual periods, painful or heavy menstrual periods, not having signs of ovulation, whether it's with at-home testing or physical signs, that's a sign of infertility, miscarriages, and finally, hormonal changes like acne, hair changes, and weight changes can be a sign of infertility. I hope this video is helpful. Everybody is different, and some people will have some of these signs and not have any infertility. Some people will struggle with infertility and not have any of these signs. Every person is different. Every presentation is different. But I want you to take away knowledge and know when to ask your doctor questions and advocate for your care. So like this video if you learned something, comment with questions that you have. Be sure and subscribe to this channel so you get my weekly videos all about reproductive health. And until next week, wishing you love, luck, and pineapples.